Irv Cross, former Northwestern and Philadelphia Eagles, and also for the Los Angeles Rams. Irv, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I miss you on TV.
Well, yeah, those were the good old days.
They weren't that old, are they?
I still do some things locally in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. We have the Vikings post-game shows, and unfortunately, we haven't had a whole lot to be excited about.
I was going to say, I'm sorry to hear that for you.
Yeah.
Vikings had a rough season.
Well, yeah, but I think the league overall has had a difficult year. With things starting the way they did with the work stoppage and everything else, and guys not having their off-season training programs. My greatest fear, and I haven't seen any numbers, but I know that this happens, that when you miss the contact portion of training camp, the injury rates go up. So if you look to every team in the league and check their rosters, you'll find key players out for extended periods of time. Instead of being out 2 or 3 days or one game, they're out 3 or 4 games, or maybe the entire season. So this injury thing is something I was really, really concerned about when they missed training camp, and it seems to be coming to fruition. The teams that are healthiest right now are the teams that are doing better than anybody else.
I remember you were from the NFL Today. I mean, every Sunday morning I'd be watching with you and Jimmy the Greek and Brett Musburger. You guys were absolutely incredible.
Well, and Phyllis George.
Don't forget Phyllis.
Yeah.
That's the only reason some of us tuned in. Don't take it personally.
Well, I know that, and I appreciate that, and I can understand why. But you should have been sitting next to her for 17 years like I did.
Did you guys fight who sat next to her, or did Jimmy the Greek ever say, let me in there?
Well, the Greek and Phyllis had their differences on a lot of things, but I think when it came to doing your show, everybody kind of focused on that and tried to put our best foot forward, and it worked out well.
Now, how is it that you came to CBS to become the first African-American working full-time as a sports analyst on a...
Well, it's really funny because a lot of ball players have asked me, how did you get into television? And I'm from Hammond, Indiana, right outside of Chicago. And of course, went to Northwestern, and was always involved in community service type projects, working with any number of groups. And I've always believed in giving back. And as a rookie, when I came to Philadelphia Eagles, they were the defending world champions, and the guys were oftentimes asked to go out to speak for fees. And I told our PR department, if you had a legitimate non-profit organization who wanted a speaker, I'd be happy to do it for nothing. So I get a luncheon appointment once for the Kiwanis or Rotary, one of those service clubs, and gave a presentation. And the guy in the audience came up and said, you have a great voice. You ought to go into broadcasting. So I don't know the first thing about broadcasting. So he gave me his card, and he's a sports director of a radio station in Philadelphia, WIBG. At the time was a rock and roll station. And in the 60s, rock and roll was hot. We had the Chubby Checker and a variety of rock stars coming out of Philadelphia, so it was a hot thing. But the station wanted to change their format from music to have a break for news and sports during the drive time. So I was taught how to do that. Bill Emerson was the guy's name, and the show wound up being the top show in Philadelphia. And after about nearly a year, got a call from a television station, KYW-TV, which is a Westinghouse-owned station, NBC affiliate, and said, gee, why don't you come be our sports director on the weekends? You can do both radio and television. And I said, fine, great, it'd be great. So I went there, and they had this old eyewitness news format where there's, news, weather, sports. So the last element in the evening news was a sports spot, and that's where I was for 3.5 to 4 minutes. And behind me was the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So every night, our ratings in the last 30 seconds of the broadcast would go right to the roof because people were getting ready to tune in to Johnny Carson. And they saw sports on the way through, so it wound up being the top show in Philadelphia. And when I retired, CBS called. And the guy who was station manager at WCAU in Philadelphia was there when I was in Philadelphia on the air. And our show was the number one show there, and he knew that. And I'd met him at one time and got a chance to know him anyway. But he called and said, Irv, how'd you like to come and work for CBS and be an analyst for us and do the game of the week? And, hey, great. So did that. And then from there, it worked out pretty well for about 4 years. And they wanted to develop a new format for the NFL Today, or a studio show, rather. And at the time, it was the NFL Today, but we're not quite sure which way it was going to go. And Bob Wessler, who was the president of the sports division at that time, called Musburger, he was in Chicago at the time. Brent and I went to Northwestern together, by the way. And Phyllis George just won the Miss America contest to myself. And Jack Whitaker at that time was on the show. That was before Jimmy the Greek. Greek came in a couple of years later. But that's how it started. I just tell the guys I got involved in broadcast because I did a speaking engagement for a nonprofit organization for nothing.
Okay. I've just figured it was the Philadelphia defensive secondary was a hotbed for broadcasters because you had Tom Brookshire.
Well, yeah, Brookie was there. Yeah, well, actually, we had Tom Brookshire was working locally, and Pete Retzlaff was a wide receiver,
right.
Also worked locally. He was with CBS, and I was on the other side with NBC. But yeah, and Brookie and I were very close. I mean, not only from the broadcasting angle, but he helped me learn a lot about defensive play in the National Football League. I was a running back and then an end in college and sort of an in-between guy. I could play a variety of positions, but when I came to Philadelphia, they decided to put me on defense. And frankly, that was the first time I really spent full time as a defensive back on the corner. I was an end in college because 185 ends don't work in the National Football League. So they moved me out there, and Brookie taught me everything he could, and I picked it up and went along. And unfortunately, I guess the third or fourth game of the 61 season, he had his leg broken and ended his career. It was against the Bears, by the way, playing in Philadelphia, and the wide receiver came back on the crackback block, and it was a legal block, just down low, and broke his had a compound fracture of both bones in his right leg, and that ended his career. And I went in and played ever since.
Well, he
Johnny Morris, was it?
Pardon?
No,
it was John Farrington.
Okay.
I don't know if you know John Farrington in Grambling or someplace. Right. But anyway, and the reason why that happened, and we don't talk about it a lot, but we put in a new defense that year, and we put that defense in to stop Ditka. They just rookie tight end who was killing everybody. So we put an extra defensive back in the game, shifted linebackers over. Right now they call it a nickel defense, but we did that in 1961 to stop Ditka, to have an extra defensive back on the field to protect against him. So because of that, Brookie was further outside than he would normally be in this position, and he came back to stop a sweep. The receiver, actually, he should have come from outside in, but he got inside the guy, and Farrington came back on a good crackback block and broke his leg. But that was the first time the nickel defense was played, and George Allen was the defensive coordinator for the Bears, and when he became head coach of the Rams, put that defense in as one of our prime defenses in L.A. That's one reason why he traded for me.
But you guys should know, nobody can stop Ditka.
Oh, yeah.
Not even 11 players tackling can stop Ditka.
Well, I've known Mike for a long, long time. He came out of Pitt. We graduated the same year because he played on the All-Star team in 1961, and a guy named E. Kimbrough was one of my teammates with the Northwestern, was also on the All-Star team. So I didn't really meet Mike until we started to play against each other, but I saw him in training camp because in those days the college All-Stars worked out at Northwestern. So we saw all those guys come through, and so every year when the All-Stars came in, they stayed on the campus, and I got a chance to know a lot of those guys before they turned pro.
So Tom Brookshire must have been an awfully good teacher. You must have been an awfully good student because you were a seventh-round pick. Did you think you were going to make it?
Well, yeah. But matter of fact, it's funny. I went there thinking that. I hope I did make it. I was drafted by 3 clubs. Of course, in those days you had the old American Football League and the Canadian League. So I was drafted by Toronto and the New York Titans, who are now the Jets. And the Eagles, and I decided, well, I'd go to Philadelphia because, they're the world champions. If I make it there, great. If not, I'd have a chance to go someplace else. But I was really more concerned about going to school. I was registered to go to graduate school, and I told the Eagles when I got there, general manager must have thought I was nuts. I said, look, if you guys didn't cut me early, you're going to have to go back to school. Well, as it turned out, things worked out, and I had a skill set they were looking for, and things worked. As a matter of fact, I wound up being the signal caller as a rookie. I was one of the defensive signal callers for the defense, and I was always a pretty detailed student of the game, so I understood it pretty well. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to play as long as I did.
What do you think of the Today Show? I mean, the pregame shows today. Do you like the way they're doing them, or you miss the old days?
Well, I do miss the old days only because I think today it's sort of a personality contest. How many jokes you can tell and who can break stories that may or may not be true. And I just don't like that. I think that one of the things we tried hard to do as reporters objectively as possible, to give people the story on who the players were, give them some insights on what their likes and dislikes were, and obviously talk about the game and try to explain the game in terms of how it's played. And I think that when I listen to the shows today, I hear everybody's opinions, but nobody's telling me what the teams are really doing. And what does the head coach think? How do they run these things? And I think that you've got a whole new business with fantasy football, which I think is kind of interesting because people who are fantasy football fans, there are millions of them, and it's drawn a whole new fan base in the league. Look at the game a little differently in terms of team concept, team to team. You're more concerned about individuals, and I think that drives interest in different ways, and therefore you lose the impact of what a team really is.
Well, thank you for your insight. It's been wonderful. Wish we could go longer. If we had a 2-hour show,
I could talk forever. Well, thanks for calling. I'm sorry. I'm glad we had a chance to chat. And did you ever get up to Evanston once in a while?
Sure.
Well, I'd like to see, Krista. Hopefully one day Northwestern will get a new stadium up there. But the stadium, sports for the most part doesn't really drive the university. But I was out there a couple of years ago. We had a little special reunion for Irv Cross.wmv, and a lot of the guys came back, and it was really great to see him again. And I walked in the stadium. I said, "Wow, I didn't realize the stadium is as old as it is." But it is what it is, and they make good use of it. But hopefully one day they'll get a. I know nobody's talking about doing that there, but it'd be nice to see them get an upgraded stadium.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a happy New Year.
Thanks, you too. Thanks for calling. All right, bye.